The dying hive workers' fingers have turned the color of industrial runoff, but they still grip the requisition chit with religious fervor. Stamped 17 times by 17 different bureaucratic offices, the paper represents 3 months of navigating imperial healthcare, if you can call it that. Around him, the queue stretches through 3 city blocks of Lower Tertius, a human river of festering wounds, hacking coughs, and the particular desperation that comes from knowing your body belongs to the Emperor first, and perhaps to you never. The line moves with the mechanical precision of a factory conveyor. Every 12 minutes, the great brass doors of sanctified medical facility, Tertius 7, swing open with a groan that sounds almost organic, almost in pain. A servo skull drifts out, its red eyes scanning the crowd before selecting the next candidate for processing. Not healing. Processing. This is the intake ritual, and it begins not with medical examination, but with theological assessment. Triage Chaplain Mordian Vex stands behind reinforced glass, his augmetic eyes cycling through spectrums invisible to baseline human vision. He reads not injury severity, but social utility scores, tithe compliance records, genetic purity indices. The woman before him bleeds from a workplace accident, a munitions factory explosion that took her left arm. But Vex's screens display her family's 3-generation tax delinquency, her husband's minor heretical utterance recorded by Hab Block informants, her daughter's suboptimal productivity ratings from the Youth Labor Corps. "Classification, burden adjacent," he announces to the scribe servitor. "Ward 93, amputation authorization pre-approved." The woman's remaining hand shakes as she signs the loyalty oath in her own blood, a requirement that serves no medical purpose but reinforces the fundamental truth of imperial healthcare. Your flesh is on loan from the throne, and it can be recalled at any time. Behind her, a young man with radiation, burns covering 40% of his body, clutches forged documentation. His real tithe record shows 14 years of perfect compliance, but the forgery lists him as the son of a deceased regimental officer. The lie will buy him real medicine, actual surgical intervention, perhaps even a clean bed. If discovered, it will earn him a penitent's brand and assignment to the deep wards. But radiation sickness kills in weeks, while imperial justice takes months to process minor fraud. The mathematics of survival demand the gamble. Vex processes him as service adjacent, provisional. Ward 47. The good beds, the ones with working IV apparatus and lighting that doesn't flicker with the factory shifts. Every decision creates a paper trail that extends far beyond medical records. The woman's amputation authorization triggers automatic enrollment in the servitor candidate program. The young man's provisional status earns him a surveillance, designation, medical recovery tracked alongside ideological compliance. Both outcomes were determined before either patient spoke a single word to actual medical staff. This is triage as social engineering, medicine as political tool. The chaplain reads from the Medicae Canonicus, the sacred text that categorizes every ailment not by pathology, but by spiritual significance. Workplace injuries indicate insufficient devotion to duty. Genetic defects suggest bloodline corruption. Psychological trauma reveals dangerous individualism. The text provides treatment protocols based not on effectiveness, but on ideological appropriateness. A servo skull announces the evening's statistics through voxcasters mounted above the queue. Today's intake processed 743 citizens. Classification breakdown. Burden adjacent, 412. Service adjacent, 297. Priority exempt, 34. The numbers never change significantly. The ratios remain constant regardless of actual medical need, because they reflect policy, not pathology. As the brass doors close for the evening shift change, those still waiting settle into practiced resignation. Some will die before morning. Others will discover their conditions have worsened sufficiently to earn higher classification scores, proximity to death being the most reliable path to actual medical attention. The queue has its own economy. Information brokers selling rumors about tomorrow's quotas, scribes offering literacy services for those who cannot read their own death sentences, hawkers peddling blessed painkillers that are mostly industrial alcohol mixed with sanctified ash. But the most valuable commodity is understanding the system that determines who lives and who feeds the flesh tithe. Those who learn the classification algorithms, who master the bureaucratic rituals, who understand that imperial medicine treats society, not individuals, they are the ones who might survive long enough to discover what happens beyond those brass doors. The worker with gangrenous fingers finally reaches the threshold as the morning shift begins. His chit bears 23 stamps now, each representing a small victory over the machinery of deliberate indifference. But victory is measured differently here. He will enter the facility not as a patient seeking healing, but as raw material entering a processing system whose true function has nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with maintaining the precise balance of suffering that keeps the Imperium stable. What he doesn't yet understand, what none of them understand, is that some citizens never wait in the queue at all. They arrive through service corridors, their intake processed by different chaplains using different criteria entirely. The evening's 34 priority-exempt classifications represent a parallel medical system, one that operates according to rules the dying masses will never learn. The service corridors that carry the priority-exempt exist in architectural negative space, hidden within the brutalist geometry of sanctified medical facility Tertius 7, while the gangrenous worker shuffles through the main atrium, a cathedral of deliberate discomfort where ceiling heights crush the spirit and floor patterns guide movement like cattle chutes. His social betters glide through passages designed with entirely different intentions. These hidden arteries snake through the facility's bones, connecting private lifts to exclusive treatment suites, bypassing the maze entirely. The corridors are wide enough for proper stretchers, well lit by actual lumens rather than flickering chem lights, ventilated with air that doesn't carry the stench of mass suffering. They represent the true medical infrastructure, built not for the masses, but for those whose bodies hold genuine value to the imperial machinery. The main facility operates on a different architectural philosophy entirely. Every design choice serves control rather than care. Corridors branch and merge without apparent logic, creating a labyrinth where lost patients burn calories they cannot spare searching for treatment they may never receive. Dead ends terminate in small chambers containing only a single pict screen displaying rotating imperial propaganda. Suffering purifies, pain proves faith, your flesh serves. The deliberately confusing layout serves multiple functions. Patients who cannot navigate the maze demonstrate insufficient mental capacity for complex medical intervention. Those who collapse from exhaustion during the search process automatically qualify for servitor candidacy evaluation. The architecture itself performs triage, sorting the worthy from the worthless through simple endurance testing. Ward hierarchies mirror this spatial segregation with mathematical precision. The facility rises 7 levels above ground, descends 4 levels below. The higher the floor, the better the care. The lower the level, the closer to industrial processing. Ward 1 through 20 occupy the upper reaches. Private rooms with windows, working medical equipment, staff who remember the Hippocratic principles buried beneath layers of theological doctrine. Ward 47, where the young man with forged papers has earned provisional placement, sits on level 3. Beds with actual mattresses, IV drips that deliver medicine rather than blessed water, monitoring equipment that functions more often than it fails. Even here, the architecture communicates hierarchy through ceiling height, lighting quality, the presence or absence of decorative elements that make spaces feel human rather than purely functional. Ward 93 sprawls across level 6, warehouse-sized chambers where beds are stacked in military rows, 3,000 patients processed simultaneously through standardized protocols. The woman with the severed arm will share her IV drip with 7. Other patients receive medication on a schedule determined by production efficiency rather than medical need. The ward's design eliminates privacy, dignity, individual identity. Patients become inventory, tracked by number rather than name. But the architecture's true cruelty reveals itself in the basement levels. Sub-level 1 houses the flesh processing facilities, operating theaters where organs are harvested from living patients, too damaged for conventional treatment, but too valuable to waste. Sub-level 2 contains the servitor conversion chambers, where brain-dead patients undergo cybernetic integration. Sub-level 3 stores the industrial bioreactors that convert human tissue into chemical compounds for factory use. Sub-level 4 remains officially classified, accessible only through service corridors that require specialized authorization. The facility's architectural plans show it as deep storage, but whispered rumors among staff speak of research laboratories, experimental wards, chambers where patients disappear, not through death, but through transformation into something no longer recognizably human. The deliberate maze structure serves another, more subtle purpose. It prevents patients from understanding the facility's true scope. Someone confined to Ward 93 cannot comprehend the luxury of Ward 1, cannot imagine the horrors of Sub-level 3. The architecture fragments experience, making systematic comparison impossible. Each ward becomes its own reality, with patients unable to grasp the broader machine, of which they form merely one component. Even the staff movement patterns reinforce this compartmentalization. Medici orderlies assigned to upper wards never descend below level 5. Servitor technicians working the sub-levels never ascend above ground floor. Knowledge of the facility's complete function exists only at the highest administrative levels, where hospitalers and chirurgeon primaris coordinate the intricate balance between medical theatre and industrial processing. The architecture also weaponizes scarcity through precise resource distribution. Each ward receives exactly the medical supplies its patient classification warrants, never more, rarely less. Ward 1 maintains stockpiles of genuine pharmaceuticals, advanced surgical equipment, diagnostic tools that approach pre-age of technology sophistication. Ward 93 operates with medical supplies that are often expired, equipment that functions intermittently, pharmaceuticals that are frequently industrial substitutes, blessed by rote ritual. This scarcity isn't accidental shortage, but deliberate allocation. The facility's basement levels contain vast storage chambers holding medical supplies sufficient to properly treat every patient in the building. But distribution follows social utility algorithms rather than medical need. The supplies exist not to be used, but to demonstrate the system's capacity for mercy. Mercy that must be earned through proper ideological compliance and social value. The facility's central elevator system embodies this architectural theology of controlled access. The lifts are programmed to recognize patient identification implants, automatically routing individuals to their designated levels, while restricting access to inappropriate floors. A Ward 93 patient cannot accidentally discover Ward 1's amenities. A Sublevel 4 researcher cannot impulsively visit the main hospital levels where questions might arise about their work. But the elevators also serve a more sinister function. They track patient movement with minute precision, creating detailed maps of behavior patterns, medical compliance, attempted unauthorized access. This surveillance data feeds into social utility recalculations that can upgrade or downgrade patient classifications in real time. Attempting to access a higher ward can result in immediate transfer to lower levels, while resigned acceptance of assigned treatment areas demonstrates the proper imperial virtue of knowing one's place. The gangrenous worker, finally processed through intake, receives his ward assignment with the same numb acceptance he once showed factory quotas. Ward 93, subsection J, bed 2847. The numbers mean nothing to him, but they represent precise calculations of his social value, medical potential, and ultimate utility to the imperial system. He cannot know that his bed assignment places him exactly 17 meters from a concealed access panel leading to Sublevel 2. He cannot know that his classification includes an automated flag for potential servitor conversion should his condition deteriorate beyond therapeutic intervention. He cannot know that the facility's true purpose has nothing to do with healing his infection, and everything to do with determining whether his flesh serves the Emperor, better alive or dead. But as he follows the corridor markings toward his assigned processing area, the architecture itself begins teaching him these lessons through experience rather than explanation. The corridor markings guide the gangrenous worker through a series of checkpoint stations, each staffed by figures whose medical training occurred not in universities, but in seminaries. These are the hierophants of pain, the theological bureaucrats who have transformed healing into hermeneutics, diagnosis into divination. Sister Chirurgeon Venaya Mortas stands at checkpoint 7. Her surgical vestments bearing the twin symbols of the Adeptus Ministorum and Adeptus Mechanicus, faith and flesh united in service to the Golden Throne. Her augmetic eyes scan not for symptoms, but for spiritual indicators, reading the worker's gangrene as a text written by divine judgment. The infection's spread pattern, its coloration, the particular odor of decay, all these become verses in a sacred language that diagnoses sin before disease. Present your malady for theological assessment, she commands, her voice carrying the authority of someone who believes suffering serves a higher purpose. The worker extends his rotting fingers, unable to comprehend that his medical examination has become a confession. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis consults her personal copy of the Catalogue of Maladies, a tome that categorizes every ailment not by pathology, but by the spiritual failures that manifest as physical corruption. Gangrene of the extremities indicates insufficient devotion to manual labor. Hands that have shirked the Emperor's work deserve to rot. The text provides precise treatment protocols based not on medical effectiveness, but on appropriate penance. Stage 3. Corruption of the working flesh, she announces to her scribe servitor. Causation. Spiritual negligence in sacred labor. Prescribed intervention. Purification through mortification, followed by amputation if penance proves insufficient. This is medicine as moral judgment, healing predicated on deserving rather than need. The Sister Chirurgeon's training included 6 years of theological study, for every 1 year of anatomical instruction. She learned to read flesh as scripture, to interpret symptoms as divine communication, to prescribe suffering as sacrament. Her surgical skills serve not the patient's welfare, but the Emperor's will, and those two concerns rarely align. The worker receives his first treatment. Blessed pain. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis applies sanctified acid to his gangrenous tissue, explaining that purification requires conscious participation in cleansing agony. Anesthesia would rob him of the spiritual benefits inherent in proper suffering. He must feel the Emperor's judgment burning away his sin-infected flesh, must offer his pain as prayer for forgiveness. The acid treatment serves no medical purpose. The gangrene requires surgical debridement and antibiotic therapy. But both procedures cost resources better reserved for patients whose spiritual condition warrants genuine intervention. The blessed acid costs nearly nothing, inflicts maximum suffering, and demonstrates the facility's commitment to treating the soul through the flesh. As the worker writhes in agony, Sister Chirurgeon Mortis begins her rounds through Ward 93, leading a procession that resembles religious ceremony more than medical practice. Her staff carries incense burners that mask the stench of decay while filling the air with sacred smoke. Patients are expected to chant responses to her liturgical diagnoses, transforming their ward into a cathedral of controlled suffering. Patient 2847, she intones, reading from data slate decorated with holy seals. Your flesh rebels against righteous service. Do you accept the Emperor's judgment manifest in your corruption? I accept, the worker gasps, having learned the required response from patients around him. Do you submit your pain as offering for your spiritual cleansing? I submit. Do you acknowledge that your healing depends not on our intervention, but on your worthiness before the golden throne? I acknowledge. This ritual occurs at every bedside, transforming medical rounds into mass confession. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis moves through the ward like a high priestess conducting communion, offering blessed suffering to congregants who have no choice but to participate. The medical examination becomes secondary to theological assessment, with treatment decisions made through divination rather than diagnosis. Her augmetic eyes contain scanner equipment capable of precise medical analysis, but she consults her devotional texts more often than her technical readouts. The Catalogue of Maladies provides spiritual causation for every ailment, Cancer indicates insufficient faith. Infection suggests moral corruption. Mental illness reveals dangerous individualism. Each diagnosis comes with prescribed penances that somehow always involve pain, deprivation, or permanent disfigurement. But the Sister Chirurgeon's theological training serves practical functions beyond spiritual theatre. By framing medical care as religious ritual, the facility transforms patient expectations from entitlement to gratitude. Suffering becomes not system failure, but divine gift. Death represents not medical inadequacy, but spiritual promotion. The theological framework makes systematic neglect appear as higher purpose. The mortification core represents this philosophy's purest expression. These medical staff have embraced the doctrine that deliberate suffering purifies patients' souls more effectively than mere healing. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis belongs to their ranks, having undergone ritual scarification that reminds her daily that flesh exists to serve spirit, never the reverse. She applies this principle through treatment protocols that prioritize spiritual benefit over physical outcome. Broken bones heal through prayer rather than proper setting, because dependency on material intervention suggests insufficient faith. Infections receive blessing rather than antibiotics, because divine favor should prove stronger than mere chemistry. Surgery occurs without anesthesia, because unconsciousness prevents patients from offering their pain as proper sacrifice. These protocols produce exactly the mortality rates the facility requires. Too much healing would suggest the system works, encouraging patient demands for better treatment. Too little healing would reduce the facility's utility as social control mechanism. The mortification core maintains precise balance between hope and despair, keeping patients grateful for minimal intervention while preventing expectations of genuine care. The Sister Chirurgeon's personal augmetics embody this theological paradox. Her mechanical eyes can diagnose conditions with superhuman precision, but her training forbids acting on that knowledge without proper spiritual authorization. Her surgical mechadendrites could perform operations of incredible delicacy, but doctrine requires that she use crude manual instruments that inflict maximum trauma during intervention. She possesses the tools for genuine healing, but applies them only when treating patients whose souls have been deemed worthy of such investment. The priority exempt receive her full technical capabilities, experiencing medical care that approaches miraculous effectiveness. Everyone else receives her theological limitations, enduring treatment designed to improve their spiritual condition through physical degradation. As evening approaches, Sister Chirurgeon Mortis completes her rounds by consulting the catalogue of maladies for tomorrow's treatment schedules. The worker with gangrene will receive another application of blessed acid, followed by ritual amputation if his condition fails to improve through proper faith. His severed fingers will feed the bioreactors in Sublevel 3, while his remaining flesh continues serving the Emperor through whatever capacity his diminished form allows. The catalogue provides detailed procedures for every stage of this process, treating human dismantlement as religious ceremony, requiring precise ritual observance. But buried within its theological language are references to alternative protocols, treatments that actually heal rather than merely mortify. These sections remain sealed with official warnings about their dangerous spiritual implications, accessible only to medical staff treating patients whose recovery serves imperial interests. The worker cannot know that effective treatment exists just pages away from the protocols destroying his body. He cannot know that his sister chirurgeon possesses both the knowledge and tools to save his hand, his arm, perhaps his life. He cannot know that his suffering serves not the Emperor's glory, but the facility's quotas, not divine justice, but bureaucratic necessity. But as the blessed acid continues eating through his infected tissue, he begins to understand that his medical treatment has become indistinguishable from punishment, and that distinction may be the point. The blessed acid that devours the worker's gangrenous tissue arrives through a supply chain that embodies the imperial philosophy of controlled scarcity. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis draws the corrosive compound from a dispenser marked with purity seals and devotional scripts, but the substance itself originated in the same chemical refineries that produce industrial solvents for Hive City manufacturing. The only difference is the blessing ritual performed by tech adepts who add trace amounts of sanctified ash to each batch. This is pharmaceutical policy as social engineering. Real medicine exists. The facility's basement storage levels contain antibiotics that could eliminate the worker's infection within days, surgical tools that could save his fingers, anesthetics that could spare him agony. But these genuine pharmaceuticals are classified as strategic medical resources, reserved for populations whose recovery serves specific imperial objectives. The dispenser beside Sister Chirurgeon Mortis contains 3 different substances, all labeled as Blessed Purification Compound. The first is actual medical-grade antiseptic, reserved for priority-exempt patients and facility staff. The second is industrial solvent mixed with holy water, used for service-adjacent classifications. The third is manufacturing waste products sanctified through ritual blessing, distributed to burden-adjacent patients like the gangrenous worker. The labeling system ensures that medical staff can maintain plausible ignorance about treatment quality. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis genuinely believes she applies the same purification compound to all patients, because the catalogue of maladies teaches that faith determines efficacy rather than chemistry. Her theological training prevents her from questioning why some patients recover miraculously while others deteriorate despite identical treatment protocols. This pharmaceutical apartheid operates through distribution networks that mirror imperial social hierarchy with mathematical precision. The facility receives regular shipments from Sector Medical Command, but allocation follows quotas determined by political calculation rather than medical need. Ward 1 receives pharmaceutical supplies worth more than most planetary defense budgets. Ward 93 receives chemical substitutes that cost less than the blessing rituals performed over them. The economics reveal the system's true priorities. Manufacturing genuine antibiotics costs the Imperium approximately 12 thrones per dose, while producing blessed industrial solvents costs less than 1 throne per gallon. The price difference funds other imperial projects while maintaining the illusion of universal medical care. Patients receive treatment, but effectiveness correlates directly with social utility scores rather than medical requirements. Apothecarian Magnus Drenth oversees pharmaceutical distribution from his command station, overlooking the facility's central supply hub. His screens display real-time inventory tracking for thousands of different compounds, but the data reveals a deliberate pattern of artificial scarcity. Production facilities operate at 30% capacity, while demand exceeds supply by orders of magnitude. The shortfall isn't industrial failure, but calculated policy. "Current inventory status," he announces to his staff during the evening briefing. "Priority-grade pharmaceuticals, sufficient for projected noble patient load, plus 15% emergency reserve. Service-grade compounds, adequate for military personnel and essential civilian classifications. Burden-grade substances, unlimited supply available from industrial waste streams." The terminology obscures the reality that only priority-grade pharmaceuticals qualify as actual medicine. Service-grade compounds may provide marginal therapeutic benefit, but their primary function is psychological, maintaining hope while preventing genuine recovery. Burden-grade substances serve purely ceremonial purposes, allowing medical staff to perform treatment rituals without expending valuable resources on worthless populations. This system creates its own enforcement mechanisms through black market networks that operate with tacit imperial approval. Real pharmaceuticals command prices equivalent to years of labor wages, making them accessible only to families willing to sacrifice everything for a chance at genuine healing. But the black market also provides intelligence-gathering opportunities, identifying populations with hidden wealth, dangerous independence, or insufficient acceptance of their assigned social positions. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis unknowingly participates in this intelligence operation when she observes which patients produce real pharmaceuticals during treatment. Families who somehow acquire genuine antibiotics reveal themselves as security risks requiring additional surveillance. Patients who accept blessed substitutes without question demonstrate proper imperial conditioning worthy of note in their permanent files. The pharmaceutical supply chain also serves recruitment purposes for specialized imperial programs. Patients who survive despite receiving burden-grade treatment demonstrate genetic resilience valuable for military service. Those who deteriorate predictably provide useful data for biological weapons research. The entire system functions as a massive screening program, identifying useful populations while disposing of redundant human resources. But the most insidious aspect of pharmaceutical scarcity lies in its psychological effects on medical staff. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis genuinely believes she provides the best available care, because her training prevents her from recognizing effective medicine. When priority-exempt patients recover through genuine pharmaceutical intervention, she attributes the outcome to superior faith rather than superior chemistry. When burden-adjacent patients die despite treatment, she blames spiritual inadequacy rather than systemic neglect. This cognitive conditioning serves crucial functions for facility operations. Medical staff who understood the artificial nature of pharmaceutical scarcity might develop dangerous compassion for their patients. They might begin questioning treatment protocols, demanding access to effective medicine, or worse, providing unauthorized care using their knowledge of hidden supply reserves. The facility maintains several layers of supply security to prevent such unauthorized access. Priority-grade pharmaceuticals require biometric authorization from multiple staff members, with usage tracked down to individual doses. Service-grade compounds need supervisory approval and detailed justification documentation. Only burden-grade substances can be dispensed freely, ensuring that compassionate staff members can provide unlimited quantities of useless treatment without affecting actual medical resources. As the worker's blessed acid treatment continues destroying his infected tissue, the supply chain prepares his next pharmaceutical intervention. The catalogue of maladies prescribes sanctified analgesic compound for patients experiencing purification pain. The substance Sister Chirurgeon Mortis will inject contains primarily industrial alcohol, mixed with trace amounts of actual painkillers, enough to provide minimal relief while maintaining the majority of therapeutic suffering. The real painkillers sit in climate-controlled storage just 3 levels below, pharmaceutical-grade opiates capable of eliminating agony entirely. But those substances are reserved for patients whose comfort serves imperial purposes. Nobles recovering from cosmetic surgery, military officers requiring rapid return to duty, government officials whose productivity depends on pain-free function. The worker cannot know that effective pain relief exists within the same building where he writhes in agony. He cannot know that his sister chirurgeon could eliminate his suffering with substances readily available through proper authorization channels. He cannot know that his pain serves not medical necessity, but social control, not therapeutic purpose, but political function. But as the sanctified alcohol burns through his system, providing just enough relief to prevent unconsciousness, while maintaining maximum awareness of his deteriorating condition, he begins to understand that his treatment follows rules that have nothing to do with healing and everything to do with demonstrating his place in the hierarchy of imperial concern. The pharmaceutical apartheid ensures that hope remains precisely calibrated, enough to prevent despair, insufficient to encourage expectation of genuine care. And tomorrow, when Sister Chirurgeon Moritas returns with her blessed compounds and sanctified substitutes, the system will continue functioning exactly as designed, processing human suffering with the same efficiency it applies to any other imperial resource. The sanctified alcohol coursing through the worker's system provides just enough numbness to allow him to observe the ritual preparations occurring around his bed. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis has returned with a procession of medical staff, their movements choreographed like a religious ceremony. They carry surgical instruments, blessed by the facility's tech priests, ceremonial vestments that transform the operating area into a sacred space, and most unnervingly, recording equipment to document what they term sacramental intervention. The worker's gangrenous fingers have deteriorated beyond the point where blessed acid can maintain the pretense of treatment. The catalogue of maladies prescribes ritual amputation, not as medical necessity, but as spiritual cleansing. His corrupted flesh must be severed from his body in precise accordance with liturgical requirements, each cut serving both practical and devotional purposes. Patient 2847, Sister Chirurgeon Mortis intones, her voice carrying the authority of someone who genuinely believes surgery serves divine will. Your flesh has failed its sacred duty. We shall separate the corrupt from the pure, offering your sacrifice to the golden throne, while preserving what remains for continued service. The operating theater they construct around his bed bears no resemblance to sterile medical environments. Incense burners release sacred smoke that masks antiseptic odors while creating appropriate religious atmosphere. Devotional candles provide flickering illumination that transforms shadows into dancing spirits. The surgical instruments themselves are decorated with purity seals and devotional scripts, their medical functions secondary to their role as ritual implements. This is surgery as sacrament, cutting into flesh viewed not as medical intervention, but as opening the soul to divine judgment. The operating protocols prioritize spiritual requirements over surgical outcomes, with each incision timed to coincide with sacred chants, every suture placed according to geometric patterns that honor the Emperor's sacred mathematics. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis begins the pre-surgical blessing, her augmetic hands moving in precise ritualistic gestures, while her biological voice recites litanies from the Medicae Canonicus. The worker must remain conscious throughout the procedure. Anesthesia is considered spiritually dangerous because unconsciousness prevents patients from participating in their own purification. He must feel the Emperor's judgment separating sin from flesh, must offer his agony as prayer for forgiveness. "Do you accept that your flesh has betrayed its sacred trust?" she asks, her surgical blade poised above his infected hand. "I accept," he whispers, having learned that any other response results in classification as spiritually non-compliant, with consequences extending far beyond medical treatment. "Do you offer your corrupted tissue as sacrifice for your spiritual cleansing?" "I offer." "Do you submit to amputation as the Emperor's mercy, sparing your soul from the spread of physical sin?" "I submit." The first incision comes without warning, blessed steel parting infected skin, while the worker screams his involuntary prayer. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis works with practiced efficiency, her movements following surgical procedures corrupted by theological requirements. She must cut through bone using manual saws rather than precise laser tools, because the struggle against resistant tissue demonstrates proper devotional effort. She must cauterize wounds using blessed flame rather than surgical sealants, because sacred fire purifies, while mechanical intervention merely repairs. The amputation proceeds according to protocols that prioritize maximum spiritual benefit over optimal surgical outcome. Each severed finger is removed individually rather than efficiently, with ritual pauses between amputations for devotional recitation. The worker must confirm his acceptance of each loss, must verbally offer each digit as sacrifice, must maintain consciousness throughout the process to prove his spiritual worthiness. But beneath the theological theater, the surgery serves multiple practical functions that have nothing to do with the worker's welfare. His severed fingers will feed the bioreactors in sub-level 3, converted into industrial compounds that lubricate factory machinery throughout the hive city. His blood fills collection vessels that provide raw materials for pharmaceutical production. Even his screams are recorded for psychological warfare applications, archived as examples of proper imperial suffering. The surgical procedure also serves as entertainment for priority-exempt patients recovering in upper wards. Viewing screens throughout the facility broadcast selected operations, framed as devotional programming that demonstrates the Emperor's justice in action. Noble patients watch from comfortable beds while receiving genuine medical care, their recovery enhanced by witnessing the suffering of their social inferiors. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis possesses surgical capabilities that could perform this amputation with minimal trauma, preserving maximum healthy tissue while eliminating infection through precise intervention. Her augmetic appendages include microsurgical tools capable of cellular-level precision. Her training included advanced surgical techniques that approach the legendary skill of pre-age of technology medical practitioners. But theological requirements prevent her from applying these capabilities to burden-adjacent patients. The catalogue of maladies teaches that surgical precision suggests dangerous pride in material capability over spiritual reliance. Crude surgical methods demonstrate proper humility before the emperor's will, while advanced techniques imply insufficient faith in divine intervention. The worker receives surgery deliberately designed to inflict maximum trauma while achieving minimum therapeutic benefit. His amputation will leave jagged bone edges that prevent proper prosthetic fitting, nerve damage that ensures chronic pain, scar tissue that restricts remaining hand function. These complications aren't surgical accidents, but theological requirements, ensuring that his recovery serves as permanent reminder of the consequences of insufficient devotion to sacred labor. As Sister Chirurgeon Mortis completes the final amputation, she begins the ritual sealing process. The worker's wounds receive blessed cauterization using flame sanctified by the facility's ecclesiarch, then binding with cloth woven from the hair of martyred saints. The procedure serves no medical purpose. Actual wound sealing requires sterile materials and proper surgical techniques, but provides appropriate religious conclusion to the sacramental surgery. The severed fingers disappear into collection vessels marked with biohazard symbols and purity seals. The worker cannot know that his amputated tissue will undergo processing within hours, converted into lubricants that keep the very factory machines that originally caused his injury functioning smoothly. His sacrifice serves the industrial Imperium in ways that have nothing to do with spiritual purification and everything to do with resource recycling. But the true horror of sacramental surgery lies not in its brutality, but in its sincerity. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis genuinely believes she has performed an act of mercy, saving the worker's soul through necessary amputation while providing him the spiritual benefits inherent in conscious suffering. Her theological training prevents her from recognizing the surgery as systematic mutilation designed to extract maximum value from disposable human resources. The worker's surgical record will list the procedure as successful purification intervention with complete sacrifice recovery. His classification upgrades from burden adjacent to service capable diminished, reflecting his new status as a partially functional industrial asset. Tomorrow, he will begin rehabilitation designed not to restore his capabilities, but to identify his remaining utility to the imperial system. His phantom pain will serve as permanent reminder of the surgery's spiritual benefits, while his diminished manual capacity will prevent him from returning to his original work assignment. The combination ensures he poses no threat to imperial stability, while providing useful data about human adaptation to systematic mutilation. As the sacred smoke clears and the devotional candles are extinguished, the worker lies conscious and aware that his medical treatment has concluded not with healing, but with deliberate destruction. His body has been altered not to improve his health, but to demonstrate his expendability. Not to restore his function, but to extract his remaining value. The surgery is complete, but his education in imperial medical philosophy has only begun. The worker's screams fade into the ambient noise of Ward 93, joining a chorus of suffering that includes sounds no adult should ever hear. The crying of children undergoing their own forms of sacramental intervention. 3 beds away, a young girl, no older than 8, receives her medical examination from Sister Diagnostica Theron, whose assessment protocols bear no resemblance to pediatric care as practiced in more civilized ages. The child arrived 2 days ago with symptoms of malnutrition, sunken cheeks, distended belly, the characteristic lethargy of hive-bottom food scarcity. But her medical file reveals information far more significant than her nutritional status. Bloodline analysis showing genetic markers associated with psyche potential, intelligence, quotient testing indicating superior cognitive capacity, physical development patterns suggesting future breeding viability. Sister Diagnostica. Theron reads these assessments not with a physician's concern for the child's welfare, but with a procurement officer's eye for valuable resources. Imperial hospitals function as early screening facilities for military recruitment, servitor programs, and breeding initiatives. Medical examinations are actually talent assessment and genetic cataloging, sorting children into categories that determine their ultimate utility to the Imperial machine. Subject displays gamma-level psyche indicators, Sister Diagnostica Theron dictates to her scribe servitor, while the malnourished girl writhes under invasive neurological probes. Cognitive assessment scores exceed the 92nd percentile for social stratum. Physical genetics indicate breeding program compatibility with noble houses Tertius through Quintus. The examination continues for hours, measuring not the child's medical needs, but her strategic value to various imperial institutions. Blood samples feed genetic analysis programs that compare her DNA against breeding optimization matrices. Psychological testing assesses her compliance with authority structures, her resistance to pain, her capacity for ideological conditioning. Physical measurements determine her suitability for different forms of augmetic integration. Most disturbing is the complete absence of any therapeutic intervention. The child's malnutrition could be corrected with basic nutritional supplements costing less than a single throne. Her dehydration requires only intravenous fluid replacement. Her infected skin lesions would heal with elementary antibiotic treatment. But Sister Diagnostica Theron provides none of these interventions because her assessment focuses on the child's potential utility rather than her immediate welfare. The pediatric examination protocols reveal the imperial medical system's true priorities with brutal clarity. Children from valuable bloodlines receive comprehensive care designed to optimize their future contributions to the Empire. Those showing psychic potential are immediately flagged for Scholastica Psychana recruitment. Intelligence indicators trigger evaluations for Adeptus Mechanicus or Administratum service. Physical perfection earns consideration for noble breeding programs or Astartes recruitment screening. But children who fail these assessments face far grimmer fates. Those showing signs of mutation undergo immediate sterilization to prevent genetic contamination. The intellectually disabled are processed for servitor conversion, while their brains remain sufficiently plastic for cybernetic integration. The physically deformed feed industrial bioreactors, their tissue converted into chemical compounds that serve the hive city's manufacturing needs. The malnourished girl occupies a precarious middle position, valuable enough to warrant detailed assessment, but not sufficiently exceptional to guarantee preferential treatment. Her psyche potential, makes her dangerous if left untrained, but her social origins suggest limited investment return. Her intelligence qualifies her for specialized service, but her malnutrition indicates family genetic weakness that might compromise future performance. Sister Diagnostica. Theron consults the Pediatric Assessment Codex, a manual that treats children not as patients requiring care, but as raw materials requiring proper classification. The text provides detailed algorithms for determining optimal resource allocation based on genetic potential, social utility projections, and current Imperial personnel requirements. Medical treatment becomes secondary to strategic personnel management. Classification. Conditional recruitment candidate, she announces after completing her assessment matrix calculations. Recommended action, nutritional stabilization, followed by specialized conditioning evaluation. Scholastica Psychana preliminary screening, authorized pending parental consent documentation. The parental consent requirement serves purely administrative purposes. The child's parents, living in hive-bottom squalor, have no real choice when Imperial authorities request their daughter for specialized education. Refusal results in family reclassification as security risks, with consequences extending to employment, housing, food rations, and medical access. Consent becomes a bureaucratic formality that provides legal cover for systematic child procurement. But the most insidious aspect of pediatric processing lies in its presentation as medical care. The malnourished girl receives nutritional supplements, not because her health matters, but because her psyche potential requires proper physical development. Her parents view this intervention as miraculous healing, evidence of Imperial benevolence toward deserving citizens. They cannot comprehend that their daughter's recovery serves recruitment purposes rather than compassionate medicine. The facility's pediatric wards occupy a specialized section of Level 4, designed with architectural features that serve institutional rather than therapeutic purposes. Rooms are configured for easy surveillance rather than patient comfort. Medical equipment focuses on assessment rather than treatment. Staff training emphasizes evaluation protocols over healing practices, but the pediatric apparatus serves an even darker function. It normalizes systematic child exploitation through medical legitimacy. Parents bring sick children seeking healing and leave grateful for Imperial attention, never realizing they have delivered their offspring to assessment programs that view young humans as strategic resources to be optimized, allocated, or disposed of according to institutional needs. As evening approaches, the malnourished girl shows signs of recovery from her nutritional intervention. Her improved condition isn't evidence of compassionate care, but proof of her recruitment viability. Tomorrow, she will undergo additional testing to refine her classification, psychological resilience evaluation, ideological conditioning assessment, physical augmentation, compatibility analysis. The worker with amputated fingers observes this process with growing understanding of the facility's true nature. Children enter the pediatric apparatus as patients seeking healing, and emerge as classified resources awaiting assignment to Imperial institutions. The medical treatment they receive serves not their welfare, but their preparation for whatever role the system determines they can best fulfill. 3 beds beyond the recovering girl, another child undergoes very different treatment. This boy shows signs of minor genetic deviation, an extra digit, slightly enlarged cranium, unusual eye coloration. Sister Diagnostica, Theron approaches his bed not with assessment instruments, but with sterilization equipment, because genetic abnormality requires immediate intervention to prevent contamination of the breeding population. The boy's parents signed the same consent forms as the girl's family, believing they authorized medical treatment for their son's cosmetic differences. They cannot know that genetic normalization therapy means sterilization, that corrective intervention means permanent mutilation, that therapeutic procedure means the deliberate destruction of their family's reproductive future. But these children represent success stories within the pediatric apparatus. They receive attention, intervention, classification as valuable enough to warrant institutional interest. The majority of pediatric patients never undergo assessment at all, processed directly through disposal protocols that treat young human life as industrial waste, requiring efficient handling rather than medical consideration. The worker realizes that his own amputation, traumatic as it was, represents privilege within this system. He received surgical intervention, pain management, wound treatment. The children around him face far more comprehensive processing that views their entire existence as raw material for Imperial optimization. As the night shift begins, special medical transports arrive at service docks hidden from public view. The recovering girl will board one of these vehicles tomorrow, beginning her journey toward whatever specialized training her assessment indicated. Her parents will receive official documentation thanking them for their contribution to Imperial security, never learning the specific nature of their daughter's educational opportunity. The worker cannot sleep, listening to the sounds of children undergoing processing that masquerades as pediatric care. He begins to understand that the facility's horror extends far beyond adult suffering into systematic exploitation of human life at its most vulnerable stage. The pediatric apparatus represents the medical system's purest expression, the complete subordination of healing to institutional utility, care transformed into procurement, medicine perverted into resource extraction. Tomorrow, the transports will return for more children, and the pediatric apparatus will continue its work of converting young human potential into Imperial assets, one carefully documented medical intervention at a time. The special medical transports depart before dawn, their cargo compartments sealed, and their destinations unlisted in facility records accessible to regular staff. The malnourished girl is gone, her bed already prepared for the next pediatric assessment. But her disappearance creates a ripple of unease through Ward 93 that the facility's security apparatus moves swiftly to contain. Enforcer Medici Jorik Thane begins his morning rounds with the mechanical precision of someone who views patient compliance as a security issue rather than a medical concern. His augmetic limbs click against the ward's ferrocrete floors as he moves between beds, scanning for signs of what the facility classifies as disruptive patient behavior. Questions about missing children, complaints about treatment quality, any expression of hope that suggests dangerous independence from Imperial medical authority. The worker with amputated fingers makes the mistake of asking about the girl's condition, wondering aloud if her recovery means better treatment might be available for other patients. Enforcer Medici. Thane's response comes with swift brutality. a shock prod applied to the worker's fresh amputation wounds, while a medical recorder documents the corrective intervention for patient non-compliance. Patient 2847 demonstrates ideological deviation through unauthorized inquiry regarding classified medical procedures, Thane dictates to his scribe servitor. Corrective therapy administered. Additional surveillance authorization requested. This is ward discipline disguised as medical practice, punishment administered through therapeutic justification. The facility maintains order among desperate, dying populations through a system of enforcement that transforms security concerns into medical diagnoses. Patients who ask too many questions suffer anxiety disorders requiring sedation. Those who complain about treatment develop delusional conditions needing psychiatric intervention. Anyone who expresses hope for better care shows dangerous optimism syndrome that must be corrected through reality adjustment therapy. The enforcement mechanisms serve multiple functions beyond simple crowd control. By medicalizing dissent, the facility maintains its legitimacy as a healing institution while suppressing behavior that might reveal systematic neglect. Patients learn to suffer silently, accepting deteriorating conditions as inevitable rather than systemic, focusing on individual survival rather than collective resistance. Enforcer Medicae Thanes. Equipment includes more than shock prods and restraint devices. His medical scanner can detect elevated stress hormones that indicate patient discontent, monitor conversations for seditious content, track movement patterns that suggest coordination between patients. This surveillance data feeds into comprehensive behavioral profiles that influence treatment decisions in ways patients never suspect. The worker's inquiry about the missing girl triggers automatic flag protocols that mark him for enhanced monitoring. His medical file now includes psychological evaluation codes that will follow him through any future Imperial medical encounters. The question he asked, innocent concern about another patient's welfare, has been recontextualized as evidence of dangerous individualism requiring ongoing suppression. But the ward discipline system operates through more subtle mechanisms than overt brutality. Patients quickly learn that cooperation with authority results in marginally better treatment, while resistance brings swift deterioration of conditions. Those who inform on fellow patients receive slightly cleaner bedding, fractionally better food, minor improvements in pharmaceutical quality. The system creates its own enforcement network through incentivized collaboration. Bed 2849 houses an elderly woman whose infected surgical wound shows signs of sepsis. She has observed patterns in the facility's operations, noticed correlations between patient behavior and treatment outcomes, begun sharing her insights with other patients. Enforcer Medicae Thane approaches her bed not with medical equipment, but with a data slate containing her complete loyalty assessment. Patient displays symptoms of paranoid delusion disorder, he announces, despite her infection being entirely real and her observations being entirely accurate. Requires immediate psychiatric stabilization to prevent spread of delusional thinking to adjacent patients. The psychiatric stabilization involves psychoactive compounds that induce confusion and memory impairment, destroying her ability to recognize patterns while maintaining her basic physical functions. The treatment serves no medical purpose. Her infection continues spreading, while her cognitive capabilities are systematically dismantled. But her silence is more valuable to facility operations than her survival. This represents standard protocol for patients who demonstrate excessive awareness of institutional procedures. Medical staff can justify any intervention through psychiatric diagnoses that are impossible to disprove and difficult to appeal. The patient's accurate observations become evidence of mental illness, her legitimate concerns transformed into symptoms requiring treatment. The facility's informant network operates through carefully managed incentive structures that make collaboration appear as natural survival behavior rather than betrayal of fellow patients. Those who report unusual conversations receive minor medical improvements that seem like random good fortune. Patients who identify non-compliant behavior find their own treatment schedules mysteriously prioritized. The system makes cooperation profitable, while punishment appears spontaneous rather than systematic. Daily medical inspections function as ideological compliance checks disguised as health assessments. Enforcer Medicae. Thane examines not just wounds and infections, but prayer recitation, loyalty oath precision, proper gratitude expression for received treatment. Patients must demonstrate not only physical submission to medical authority, but spiritual acceptance of their assigned suffering. "Recite the patient's creed," he commands the worker, whose shock prod injuries still smoke from their recent application. "My flesh serves the Emperor before it serves me." The worker gasps through pain that makes speaking difficult. "My suffering purifies my soul. My gratitude honors those who grant me treatment. My silence preserves sacred medical mysteries." The creed serves multiple psychological functions. It reinforces the theological framework that justifies systematic neglect. It requires patients to vocally accept responsibility for their deteriorating conditions. It transforms medical staff from perpetrators of systematic abuse into generous providers of spiritual benefit. Most importantly, it makes resistance appear not just futile, but spiritually damaging to the resistor. The worker's recitation contains a slight hesitation during the gratitude verse, barely perceptible. But Enforcer Medicae Thane's augmetic sensors detect the micro-expression of doubt. This minor deviation earns another entry in the patient's behavioral profile, another mark indicating insufficient ideological conditioning, another step toward reclassification as a security risk requiring enhanced corrective intervention. But the most insidious aspect of ward discipline lies in its ability to make patients complicit in their own oppression. The system creates conditions where survival depends on accepting systematic abuse as legitimate medical care, where hope becomes evidence of mental illness, where questioning authority qualifies as psychiatric pathology requiring treatment. As evening approaches, Enforcer Medicae Thane completes his rounds by reviewing surveillance data from the ward's hidden monitoring systems. Conversations between patients are recorded and analyzed for seditious content. Sleep patterns are tracked for signs of depression that might indicate dangerous despair. Even dreams are monitored through neurological sensors, ensuring that patients' unconscious minds remain properly conditioned for imperial medical ideology. The worker lies in his bed, phantom pain shooting through his amputated fingers, while he processes the day's lessons in compliance. He has learned that curiosity earns punishment, that observation suggests mental illness, that hope itself can be classified as medical pathology requiring correction. His question about the missing girl, innocent concern transformed into evidence of ideological deviation, continues to influence his treatment through invisible bureaucratic mechanisms. The facility's discipline system has achieved its primary objective, converting a population of desperate patients into a self-regulating community that suppresses its own resistance to systematic medical abuse. The worker understands now that survival requires not just enduring his physical condition, but accepting the psychological framework that justifies his suffering as necessary, beneficial, even sacred. Tomorrow, Enforcer Medicae Thane will return with his shock prods and surveillance equipment, maintaining order through medical authority while ensuring that Ward 93 continues functioning as a processing facility rather than a healing institution. And the patients will cooperate because they have learned that collaboration offers the only path toward whatever minimal mercy the system might provide. The collaboration that keeps Ward 93 functioning as a self-regulating system of controlled suffering operates according to economic principles that would be familiar to any imperial merchant, if those principles weren't disguised as medical care. The worker with amputated fingers begins to understand these dynamics as he observes the subtle transactions occurring around every bed. The careful negotiations between patients and staff that determine who receives marginally better treatment and who faces accelerated deterioration. The flesh tithe system operates like taxation, but with collection methods that make traditional imperial levies seem merciful by comparison. Patients owe payment not just for their treatment, but for the privilege of occupying bed space, consuming oxygen, requiring staff attention. The currency of this payment system isn't thrones or credits, but human tissue itself, blood, skin, organs, bone marrow, extracted according to quotas that have nothing to do with medical necessity and everything to do with industrial demand. Procurator Medicae Vos Crandall oversees these extractions from his administrative station overlooking the processing floor, where patients too weak to resist provide biological raw materials for the Hive City's manufacturing sector. His screens display real-time market prices for different tissue types, premium organs for noble transplant programs, standard blood components for military medical supplies, degraded cellular matter for industrial bioreactor fuel. Current harvest quotas, he announces to his subordinates during the morning briefing, indicate high demand for type O negative blood products and regenerative tissue suitable for augmetic integration programs. Standard collection protocols remain in effect, with premium pricing available for donors meeting genetic purity specifications. The terminology obscures the reality that these donors have no choice in their participation. The flesh tithe is mandatory payment for medical services, regardless of treatment quality or outcome. Patients who refuse tissue extraction face immediate transfer to punishment wards, where collection occurs under less comfortable circumstances. Those who cooperate receive marginal improvements in care that create the illusion of voluntary transaction. The worker discovers these economic realities when Sister Medicae Orthena arrives at his bedside with collection equipment designed for blood extraction. His medical file indicates that his amputation surgery has left him temporarily unable to perform manual labor. But his circulatory system remains functional, and his blood type matches current industrial requirements. Patient 2847, she explains, with the practiced efficiency of someone who performs this procedure dozens of times daily. Your recovery requires metabolic rebalancing through therapeutic phlebotomy. The collected samples will also contribute to the facility's research programs, providing additional spiritual benefit through service to the greater Imperial medical mission. The therapeutic phlebotomy will extract 2 liters of blood, far more than medically advisable for someone recovering from traumatic surgery, but well within the quotas established for his patient classification. The blood will undergo processing within hours, converted into plasma products that command premium prices from military medical facilities treating wounded Imperial Guard regiments. Sister Medicae Orthena's extraction equipment includes refinements that maximize collection efficiency while maintaining patient viability. Automated pumps calculate optimal extraction rates based on vital signs monitoring. Biochemical additives prevent coagulation during collection while enhancing preservation for storage. The technology represents significant investment in harvesting capabilities, revealing the facility's true priorities through resource allocation patterns. But the flesh tithe extends far beyond simple blood collection. The elderly woman in bed, 2849, whose psychiatric stabilization has left her cognitively impaired but physically intact, undergoes skin grafting procedures that harvest healthy tissue for burn treatment programs, serving priority-exempt patients. Her confused state prevents her from understanding that the painful procedures removing patches of her skin serve no therapeutic purpose for her condition. The harvested skin grafts will be processed and preserved for transplant to noble patients who have suffered cosmetic damage requiring repair. Her tissue, deemed worthless while attached to her body, becomes valuable once separated for use by more important recipients. The medical justification frames the harvesting as wound healing acceleration through controlled tissue removal, making systematic exploitation appear as advanced treatment. Bone marrow extraction represents the most valuable component of the flesh tithe system, with healthy samples commanding prices equivalent to years of worker wages. Patients classified as burden adjacent provide this resource through procedures disguised as diagnostic testing. The worker watches as medical staff approach bed 2851, where a middle-aged factory supervisor recovers from what appears to be minor industrial accident. Specialized diagnostic marrow biopsy indicated for comprehensive injury assessment, the medical team explains to the supervisor, whose leg fracture could be evaluated through simple scanning procedures. But his genetic profile indicates premium marrow compatibility with several ongoing medical programs, making his bone marrow more valuable than his recovery. The extraction procedure involves drilling into his hip bone while he remains conscious, anesthesia being reserved for patients whose comfort serves institutional priorities. The collected marrow will undergo processing for military medical applications, providing stem cell treatments for wounded Astartes warriors whose recovery holds strategic value for ongoing Imperial campaigns. These economic relationships create perverse incentives throughout the facility's operations. Medical staff receive performance bonuses based on successful tissue collection rather than patient recovery rates. Treatment protocols prioritize maintaining patient viability for extended harvesting, rather than promoting healing that would reduce extraction opportunities. The system makes patient deterioration more profitable than patient recovery. The worker realizes that his amputation surgery served dual purposes, removing infected tissue that threatened his harvesting viability, while demonstrating the facility's commitment to maintaining its biological resource inventory. His severed fingers fed the bioreactors, but his remaining circulation continues serving collection quotas that will persist until his blood chemistry deteriorates beyond useful parameters. The facility's basement levels house processing equipment that rivals major industrial facilities in scope and sophistication. Centrifuge systems separate blood components with pharmaceutical-grade precision. Tissue culture laboratories multiply harvested cells for research applications. Cryogenic storage maintains organ viability for extended periods, allowing strategic stockpiling of premium biological materials. But the most disturbing aspect of the flesh tithe economy lies in its integration with patient classification systems. Those who provide higher-value biological materials receive marginally better treatment, creating incentive structures that reward genetic accident rather than human worth. Patients learn to view their own bodies as commodity inventories, calculating their survival prospects based on tissue market values rather than medical prognosis. As the blood extraction concludes, Sister Medicae or Thina marks the worker's file with collection completion codes that trigger automatic scheduling for future harvesting procedures. His blood chemistry will be monitored not for signs of recovery, but for optimal extraction timing. His treatment schedule will prioritize maintaining harvesting viability over promoting actual healing. The worker lies back against his pillow, feeling the weakness that comes from significant blood loss, understanding finally that his medical treatment has become indistinguishable from systematic resource extraction. His body serves imperial industry, not through his labor, but through his biological components, processed and redistributed according to economic calculations that measure human tissue by the gram rather than human life by its intrinsic value. Tomorrow, the collection teams will return, and the flesh tithe economy will continue converting patient suffering into industrial profit, one carefully documented extraction at a time. The collection teams never return the next morning. Instead, emergency klaxons echo through Ward 93 at 0447 local time, their piercing wail accompanied by automated announcements that transform the facility from methodical processing center into crisis management theater. The worker's weakened state from blood extraction leaves him initially confused about the commotion until he notices the medical staff's behavior patterns shifting with mechanical precision. Code Mortis 7. All personnel to emergency stations. Implement Plague Protocol Sigma 9 immediately. Sister Medicae or Thina, who had calmly extracted his blood less than 12 hours ago, now moves with urgency that suggests genuine fear rather than routine medical response. Her collection equipment disappears, replaced by hazmat gear and biological containment apparatus. The transformation reveals capabilities the facility has kept hidden throughout its daily operations of systematic neglect. The plague arrived through the ventilation systems from lower tertius manufacturing sectors, where industrial workers had been dying of respiratory failure for 3 weeks. The facility's administration knew about the outbreak, but continued normal operations because plague containment requires resources reserved for more valuable populations. Now the contagion has reached the medical facility itself, forcing administrators to choose between maintaining their processing operations and protecting their priority-exempt patients. The choice is made within minutes. Emergency barriers slam down throughout the facility, but they don't seal infected areas. They isolate valuable populations from expendable ones. Ward 1 through 20 receive immediate evacuation orders, with noble patients transferred to sealed medical transports that arrive through service corridors. Military personnel and government officials follow in secondary evacuation waves, their removal executed with efficiency that reveals long-standing contingency protocols. Ward 93 and the lower processing levels are sealed from the inside. The worker watches through reinforced observation windows as medical staff in full environmental suits monitor their isolation, taking readings with sophisticated detection equipment that has never been used for routine patient care. The facility possesses advanced medical technology, but deploys it only when institutional survival demands emergency protocols. "Attention Ward 93 patients," announces Hospitalier Primary Mordecai Voss through sealed Vox systems, his voice carrying authority that brooks no question. "Biological containment procedures are now in effect. You will remain in your current positions while medical staff implement appropriate countermeasures. Compliance with containment protocols serves the Emperor's will." The appropriate countermeasures become clear as the worker observes preparations occurring beyond the sealed barriers. Medical staff who had spent months providing theological justification for systematic neglect now demonstrate genuine medical competence, applying quarantine procedures with scientific precision rather than religious theater. Real pharmaceuticals appear from hidden storage areas. Advanced diagnostic equipment emerges from concealed compartments. Actual medical protocols replace devotional procedures. The plague response reveals the facility's true capabilities through forced transparency. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis, who had performed his amputation surgery with deliberately crude techniques, now operates sophisticated biological analysis equipment that could have diagnosed his infection within minutes and treated it without tissue loss. The blessed acid that destroyed his fingers sits unused while she applies actual antiseptics with scientific precision to prevent contamination spread. The contrast becomes stark as the worker watches priority-exempt patients receive immediate treatment with medical technology that approaches miraculous effectiveness. Plague symptoms that would require weeks of suffering in Ward 93 are eliminated within hours through pharmaceutical interventions that have been available throughout the facility's operation. The upper wards' patients recover completely, while the sealed populations are left to either survive or provide useful data about plague progression in untreated subjects. But the plague crisis serves multiple institutional functions beyond simple population triage. The emergency conditions justify implementing research protocols that would be difficult to authorize under normal operations. Ward 93 becomes a controlled environment for studying plague effects on malnourished, tissue-depleted human subjects. The workers become test populations for experimental treatments, too dangerous to risk on valuable patients. Medici researcher Cor von Thex arrives in full biological isolation gear, carrying data collection equipment that records everything from vital signs to psychological responses during plague progression. His presence reveals that the facility's research capabilities extend far beyond the tissue processing the worker had witnessed. The plague outbreak provides opportunities for live biological weapons testing disguised as emergency medical response. Initiating Experimental Protocol Plague 7, Thex announces to his recording equipment, while the worker and his fellow patients struggle with respiratory symptoms that could be easily treated. Test population consists of 347 subjects in various states of medical depletion. Hypothesis: plague progression rates correlate with prior tissue extraction levels. Begin data collection phase. The worker realizes that his blood extraction, rather than being routine medical taxation, had been preparation for this moment. His weakened state makes him a more useful test subject for studying how plague affects compromised immune systems. The flesh tithe collection has optimized him for research purposes rather than industrial supply, his value measured not by his tissue market price, but by his utility as experimental material. The facility's hidden research capabilities become visible through forced revelation. Laboratory equipment emerges from concealed storage areas. Specialized medical staff arrive through service corridors, their presence indicating that the facility operates parallel medical programs, invisible during normal operations. The crisis strips away the theological theater that disguises systematic human experimentation as religious medical practice. Most disturbing is the realization that effective treatments exist for every condition the worker has witnessed during his stay. The gangrene that cost him his fingers could have been cured with antibiotics stored 3 levels below his ward. The malnutrition killing children in the pediatric sections could be corrected with nutritional supplements available in hidden medical supply areas. The facility has always possessed the capability for genuine healing, but reserves it for social control rather than medical need. The plague progresses through Ward 93 with methodical efficiency, but its effects vary based on systematic factors that become clear through careful observation. Patients who had undergone extensive tissue extraction succumb more rapidly, their compromised immune systems providing useful data about plague interaction with deliberate medical depletion. Those who had retained more biological resources survive longer, offering extended opportunities for studying disease progression in more resilient subjects. But the worker also observes something else. Medical staff treating the plague crisis demonstrate genuine competence and sophisticated equipment when institutional survival requires effective intervention. The same facility that had justified his amputation through theological doctrine now applies scientific, medical practices with precision that suggests extensive training in actual healing arts, rather than just religious medical theater. The emergency reveals that Imperial hospitals always possessed advanced medical capabilities, but choose to withhold them, except when their own operations face existential threat. The systematic neglect isn't incompetence or resource scarcity. It's policy, designed to maintain social control while preserving effective medicine for populations whose health serves institutional priorities. As the plague spreads through the sealed ward, the worker understands that he is witnessing the medical system's true face, sophisticated capabilities deployed selectively, Effective treatments reserved strategically, healing provided only when institutional interests align with patient welfare. The crisis has stripped away the pretense that imperial medicine exists to heal rather than to control. Tomorrow, if he survives the plague, he will have learned the most important lesson about imperial medical care. The system knows how to heal, chooses not to heal, and uses systematic suffering as a tool for maintaining the precise balance of hope and despair that keeps the Imperium stable. The plague continues its work, but so does the research apparatus that treats human agony as valuable data rather than urgent medical emergency. The plague research apparatus continues its meticulous data collection as the crisis enters its 4th day. But the worker notices something unexpected. His condition has begun stabilizing rather than deteriorating. The respiratory symptoms that had threatened to overwhelm his compromised immune system are responding to treatments he doesn't remember receiving. His fever breaks during the night shift, leaving him weak but clear-headed enough to observe the subtle medical interventions occurring throughout the sealed ward. The stabilization isn't miraculous recovery. It's calculated preservation. Medical researcher Thex needs test subjects who can survive long enough to provide useful longitudinal data about plague progression, recovery patterns, and long-term organ damage. The worker's treatment serves research protocols rather than compassionate care, but the pharmaceutical interventions are genuine medicines rather than blessed substitutes. This represents a new phase in his medical education. Discharge preparation disguised as continued treatment. The facility's protocols classify him as experimental recovery candidate, a designation that earns him marginally better care until his research utility is exhausted. But the improvement serves institutional purposes rather than his welfare, preparing him for return to productive labor, while ensuring his long-term health problems provide continuing data for medical studies. Sister Evaluator Magda Kess arrives with assessment equipment that measures not his recovery, but his work capacity. Her screens display productivity calculations based on his remaining physical capabilities, reduced manual dexterity from amputation, respiratory efficiency compromised by plague exposure, circulatory capacity diminished by tissue extraction. The evaluation determines not whether he's healthy, but whether he's functional enough to resume contributing to imperial economic output. Patient 2847 demonstrates sufficient systemic recovery for labor reassignment, she dictates to her recording equipment, while the worker struggles with persistent cough that makes breathing difficult. Recommended classification: limited capacity industrial asset. Respiratory monitoring required for ongoing research participation. The discharge evaluation reveals the facility's ultimate purpose: processing human resources through controlled deterioration while maintaining their basic functionality for continued economic utility. The worker's medical treatment has optimized him not for health, but for maximum service capacity, given his deliberately imposed limitations. His recovery serves not his interests, but the imperial system's need for functional workers who pose no threat to institutional stability. The discharge process itself follows protocols designed to ensure patient gratitude rather than patient welfare. Sister Evaluator Kess explains his successful treatment outcome through theological framework that makes systematic abuse appear as divine intervention. His survival represents the Emperor's mercy. His disabilities demonstrate necessary spiritual purification. His continuing health problems prove ongoing sacred purpose. You have been blessed with recovery that demonstrates the Emperor's favor, she explains, while her equipment documents lung damage that will plague him for life. Your sacrifice of corrupted flesh has purified your soul for continued service. Your ongoing participation in medical observation honors the sacred mysteries of Imperial healing. The discharge documentation transforms his medical history into a narrative of institutional success. His gangrene becomes successfully treated infection with appropriate tissue sacrifice. His plague exposure becomes voluntary participation in biological resistance research. His blood extraction becomes therapeutic contribution to Imperial medical supply programs. Every abuse is recontextualized as benefit, every exploitation as privilege. But the most insidious aspect of discharge preparation lies in its creation of permanent dependency relationships. The worker's medical file will follow him throughout his remaining life, determining future employment opportunities, housing assignments, marriage prospects, and access to any subsequent medical care. His treatment history marks him as a medical research participant, a classification that ensures ongoing surveillance while providing justification for continued experimentation. The facility maintains extensive databases tracking former patients through comprehensive monitoring networks that extend throughout Imperial society. His employers will receive regular updates about his health status, productivity projections, and recommended work limitations. His housing supervisors will implement environmental controls designed to preserve his research utility. His social contacts will be monitored for signs of dissatisfaction with Imperial medical care. The worker receives his discharge packet, official documentation certifying his successful medical intervention, employment authorization specifying his reduced work capacity, housing assignment to a residential facility designed for ongoing medical monitoring, and most significantly, a medical debt calculation that ensures his permanent economic servitude to the Imperial healthcare system. The debt calculation includes charges for his bed occupancy, pharmaceutical interventions, surgical procedures, diagnostic testing, research participation, and administrative processing. The total exceeds what he could earn in several lifetimes of industrial labor, creating financial obligation that extends beyond his death to his family members. The debt serves not revenue generation, but social control, ensuring that any future resistance to Imperial authority affects not just him, but everyone he cares about. His new work assignment reflects his transformed status, monitoring industrial bioreactor efficiency in the same facility where his amputated fingers were processed into lubricant compounds. The assignment serves multiple functions. His respiratory damage makes him sensitive to chemical emissions that could indicate system failures. His medical monitoring provides continuing research data, and his daily exposure to the facility that consumed his tissue reinforces lessons about the consequences of questioning Imperial medical authority. The discharge process includes mandatory counseling designed to ensure proper psychological integration of his medical experience. Medical counselor Severina Thorne leads him through sessions that reframe his systematic abuse as beneficial conditioning for future Imperial service. His pain becomes strength. His disabilities become specialization. His exploitation becomes education. Your medical journey has prepared you for enhanced service to the Emperor, she explains during their final session, her augmetic eyes scanning his biometric responses for signs of insufficient gratitude. Your sacrifice has purified your flesh for sacred industrial labor. Your ongoing health monitoring ensures the Emperor's continued investment in your welfare. The counseling sessions serve multiple purposes beyond psychological conditioning. They provide final opportunities for tissue collection, saliva samples for genetic research, hair follicles for cellular analysis, psychological profile data for behavioral modification studies. The worker participates willingly, having learned that cooperation with medical authority provides the only path toward whatever minimal mercy the system might offer. As his discharge approaches, the worker observes other patients beginning their own evaluation processes. The elderly woman whose skin grafts had healed sufficiently for tissue regeneration studies. The factory supervisor whose bone marrow extraction sites had recovered enough for repeated harvesting procedures. Each patient represents ongoing research opportunities that will continue generating value long after their initial medical processing concludes. But the worker also notices something else. His replacement has already arrived. A new industrial accident victim with similar injuries, similar social classification, similar research utility. The facility operates with assembly line efficiency, processing human resources through identical degradation cycles while maintaining steady throughput of medically compromised but functionally adequate workers. His bed will be occupied within hours of his departure, beginning another cycle of theological justification, systematic abuse, research exploitation, and discharge preparation. The system continues functioning because it produces workers who are grateful for survival, compliant through debt obligation, and physically degraded enough to pose no threat to institutional authority while remaining useful for continued economic productivity. The worker packs his few possessions, including medical monitoring equipment he must wear for the remainder of his life, and prepares to leave the facility that has transformed him from healthy industrial worker to permanently compromised imperial asset. His discharge represents not healing, but successful processing, the conversion of independent human resources into controllable economic units, optimized for maximum institutional utility. Tomorrow, he will begin his new work assignment, and the facility will continue its operations, processing the next generation of patients through identical cycles of abuse disguised as medical care, one carefully documented, successful treatment outcome at a time. The worker's replacement occupies his former bed within 3 hours of his discharge, but this new patient follows a different trajectory through the facility's processing systems. Industrial Supervisor Corvin Moulton arrived with head trauma from a factory explosion, his brain function compromised, but his body intact, a combination that triggers evaluation protocols the worker never experienced during his own medical ordeal. Sister Assessor Vex Morina approaches the new patient with scanning equipment designed to measure not recovery potential, but conversion viability. Her augmetic eyes analyze cranial integrity, nervous system responsiveness, muscular coordination, all factors that determine suitability for what the facility classifies as alternative service integration. The brain-damaged supervisor represents raw material for the Imperium's most efficient labor solution, servitor conversion. The worker observes this assessment from the discharge processing area, his departure delayed by administrative procedures that seem designed to ensure he witnesses this particular evaluation. His education in Imperial medical philosophy requires understanding that the facility's processing capabilities extend beyond tissue extraction and research exploitation into complete human restructuring for industrial utility. Patient displays Class 7 cognitive impairment with preserved motor function. Sister Assessor Morina dictates to her recording equipment, while the supervisor lies unconscious, unaware that his medical examination has become procurement evaluation. Cranial architecture suitable for basic cybernetic integration. Recommending immediate transfer to conversion assessment protocol. The Servitor program represents the facility's most comprehensive recycling initiative, converting patients who cannot be discharged into lobotomized slave machines that serve Imperial industry with perfect compliance. Brain-dead patients, the permanently disabled, and the mentally ill undergo processing that removes their humanity while preserving their physical utility. The procedure isn't medical failure, but intended outcome. Hospitals serving as recruitment centers for the Servitor program. The supervisor's family arrives during visiting hours, carrying authorization documents that grant them access to his bedside. They cannot know that their signed consent forms include servitor conversion clauses buried within pages of medical terminology. The family views these documents as authorization for life-saving treatment, unable to comprehend that they're approving their relative's transformation into an industrial machine. Sister Assessor Morina explains the enhanced medical intervention available for patients with severe cognitive damage. The treatment involves neural restructuring therapy that will allow their loved one to continue serving the Emperor despite his injuries. The family receives detailed descriptions of how cybernetic integration can restore function while providing meaningful labor opportunities that honor the supervisor's pre-injury industrial service. Your family member qualifies for specialized augmetic integration that will transform his current limitations into enhanced capabilities, she explains, with practiced compassion that masks the procedure's true nature. The neural interface technology will allow him to serve the Imperium in ways that transcend normal human capacity. His sacrifice will be honored through eternal service. The family signs additional consent forms, grateful that Imperial medical science can provide hope where civilian medicine would offer only despair. They cannot comprehend that enhanced capabilities means lobotomy, followed by cybernetic control implants. They cannot understand that eternal service means decades of slave labor, until the converted flesh wears out completely. The conversion process begins immediately with the supervisor transferred to Sub-Level 2, where specialized surgical teams perform procedures that are kept hidden from regular medical staff. The worker glimpses this transfer through observation windows, watching as unconscious patients disappear into sections of the facility that most personnel never access. But the Servitor program serves functions beyond simple labor recruitment. The converted patients provide cover for the facility's experimental programs, with families celebrating their relatives' successful integration while being billed for surgical costs that fund broader research initiatives. The conversion procedures generate revenue while disposing of patients too damaged for other forms of processing. The worker's own medical file contains servitor candidacy assessments performed during his treatment, evaluations he never suspected were occurring, alongside his more obvious tissue extraction procedures. His amputation surgery included neural response testing that measured his suitability for potential conversion should his condition deteriorate beyond therapeutic intervention. The facility maintains these assessments for all patients, ensuring that no human resources are wasted through inefficient disposal. Medical technician Severon Class oversees the conversion facility's operations, managing surgical teams that perform lobotomies with industrial efficiency, while families celebrate their relatives' successful medical integration. His monthly reports track conversion quotas, processing times, and post-surgical utilization rates, statistics that measure human beings converted into industrial equipment. Current month conversion totals, he announces during staff briefings that the worker overhears through ventilation systems, indicate successful processing of 47 subjects into agricultural servitors, 31 into manufacturing units, and 12 into specialized technical applications. Quality control assessments show 96% functional integration rates with average service life projections of 14 years. The conversion statistics reveal the program's scope. Hundreds of patients monthly transformed from medical failures into industrial successes. The facility operates conversion assembly lines that rival major manufacturing installations in efficiency and output volume. The Servitor program represents Imperial medical care's ultimate expression, complete transformation of human disability into mechanical productivity. But the most disturbing aspect of servitor conversion lies in its presentation as medical success rather than systematic dehumanization. Families receive regular updates about their converted relatives' service records, detailed reports about productivity achievements, and commendations for exceptional performance. The communications maintain the illusion that conversion preserved their loved ones' essential humanity while enhancing their capabilities. The supervisor's wife receives her first update within days of the conversion procedure. Her husband has been successfully integrated into manufacturing operations, where his enhanced cognitive interface allows him to perform complex assembly tasks with superhuman precision. The report includes productivity statistics showing his superior performance compared to baseline human workers. She cannot know that her husband's consciousness was destroyed during the lobotomy procedure, that his body operates under cybernetic control systems that eliminate all independent thought. She cannot understand that his enhanced performance results from removing his capacity for fatigue, distraction, or resistance to repetitive labor. The communication framework transforms complete dehumanization into technological triumph. The conversion billing system adds final insult to systematic abuse. Families receive detailed invoices for surgical procedures, cybernetic components, integration therapy, and ongoing maintenance costs. The converted relatives become financial obligations that extend for decades, ensuring that families remain economically bound to the imperial medical system while celebrating their participation in advanced technological medicine. The worker realizes that his own discharge represents a narrow escape from conversion protocols that could have been triggered by any number of medical complications during his treatment. His recovery served research purposes that made him more valuable as an ongoing data source than as a servitor unit. But the assessment files remain in his medical records, ready for activation should his health deteriorate or his compliance with Imperial authority prove insufficient. As he completes his discharge procedures, the worker observes families arriving to visit their converted relatives in specialized viewing areas, where servitor units demonstrate their enhanced capabilities. The families watch with pride as their lobotomized loved ones perform industrial tasks with mechanical precision, unable to recognize that the perfect compliance represents complete destruction of the personalities they remember. The facility's servitor program continues expanding, with conversion quotas increasing monthly to meet growing industrial demand for perfectly compliant labor units. The worker's replacement, still unconscious from his head trauma, will undergo evaluation procedures that determine whether his brain damage qualifies him for conversion or recovery, a decision based not on medical prognosis, but on current servitor manufacturing requirements. Tomorrow, more patients will arrive with conditions that make them candidates for conversion rather than treatment, and the facility will continue its operations, transforming medical failures into industrial successes while families celebrate their participation in advanced Imperial medical technology. The servitor program represents the logical conclusion of medical care that views human beings as resources to be optimized rather than individuals deserving healing. The worker leaves the facility understanding that his survival depends not just on maintaining his health, but on preserving his utility in forms that make him more valuable intact than converted. The servitor program ensures that even medical failure serves Imperial purposes, converting every human disability into mechanical productivity through procedures that families celebrate as medical miracles. The worker exits the facility through the same brass doors where he had first entered the queue months ago, but his perspective on the medical staff's operations has been fundamentally altered by witnessing the servitor conversion protocols. The personnel who had treated his gangrene, extracted his blood, and monitored his plague recovery move through their duties with the same theological dedication he had observed throughout his stay. But now he recognizes their parallel existence within a completely different medical reality. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis concludes her shift in Ward 93 by performing her evening devotions, the same ritual purification she has practiced for 15 years of faithful service to Imperial medical doctrine. But her devotions occur in a private chamber equipped with actual medical scanners, genuine pharmaceutical dispensers, and therapeutic equipment that approaches pre-age of technology sophistication. Her personal medical care exists in a different universe from the blessed substitutes she dispenses to patients. The medical staff's survival within the facility's disease-ridden environment requires access to genuine medicine, real protective equipment, and effective treatments that remain completely separate from the theological theater they perform for patient populations. This parallel medical system operates with scientific precision, while maintaining absolute secrecy from the patients whose systematic abuse funds its operation. Chief Medical Administrator Voss maintains detailed health records for all facility personnel, tracking their exposure to biological hazards, monitoring their nutritional status, and ensuring their access to preventive treatments that could eliminate most conditions plaguing the patient wards. His personal medical suite includes diagnostic equipment worth more than entire planetary medical budgets, reserved exclusively for maintaining staff health. Monthly staff health assessment indicates optimal operational readiness, he reports during administrative briefings that occur in chambers sealed from patient areas. Vaccination programs remain current for all biological threats. Nutritional supplementation protocols prevent deficiency conditions. Advanced therapeutic interventions maintain productivity levels above Imperial Medical Service standards. The staff medical protocols reveal the systematic nature of patient neglect through stark contrast. The same facility that justifies amputation as spiritual cleansing for workers possesses surgical techniques that could have saved the man's fingers with minimal intervention. The personnel who apply blessed substitutes to dying patients receive actual pharmaceuticals that eliminate their own ailments within hours of symptom onset. But the most disturbing aspect of staff medical care lies in its psychological conditioning mechanisms. The medical personnel genuinely believe they provide the best available treatment to patients, because their training prevents them from recognizing the difference between effective medicine and theological theater. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis has never questioned why her personal medical interventions work differently from her patient treatments. Her private medical records show regular treatments for anxiety disorders, depression, and psychological trauma, conditions that arise from participating in systematic patient abuse while maintaining ideological justification for her actions. The staff medical system includes comprehensive mental health support designed to preserve personnel psychological stability while preventing dangerous compassion for patient welfare. Medical counselor Thorne treats facility staff through therapeutic protocols that reinforce their theological conditioning while eliminating guilt responses that might interfere with operational efficiency. Her sessions help medical personnel process the cognitive dissonance between their genuine healing capabilities and their deliberate infliction of suffering on patient populations. The distinction between staff medical care and patient spiritual therapy serves sacred purposes, she explains, during mandatory counseling sessions that all personnel attend monthly. Your health enables you to serve the Emperor's medical mission. Patient suffering enables them to serve the Emperor's spiritual requirements, both forms of service honor, different aspects of imperial medical doctrine. The psychological conditioning serves crucial institutional functions. Medical staff who understood the artificial nature of treatment disparities might develop dangerous empathy for their patients. They might begin providing unauthorized care, questioning treatment protocols, or worse, revealing the facility's true capabilities to patient populations or their families. Staff rotation policies ensure that personnel never remain in patient contact positions long enough to develop emotional attachments that might compromise operational efficiency. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis has worked in Ward 93 for only 8 months before transferring to research facilities, where her contact with conscious patients becomes minimal. The rotation prevents staff from witnessing long-term consequences of their treatment decisions. But rotation also serves recruitment purposes for specialized imperial programs. Medical staff who demonstrate exceptional ability to compartmentalize their genuine healing knowledge from their patient treatment protocols qualify for advancement to facilities where their capabilities serve more sensitive institutional functions. The best performers earn assignment to noble medical facilities, military hospitals, or government health services where their skills receive appropriate utilization. The worker, observing staff operations through his extended discharge processing, recognizes that the medical personnel exist within their own form of systematic exploitation. They possess genuine medical training, but can only apply it to populations whose health serves institutional priorities. Their knowledge becomes a form of punishment, understanding how to heal while being required to inflict systematic harm. Sister Diagnostica. Theron, who had processed the malnourished girl through pediatric assessment protocols, maintains her own children in private medical facilities, where they receive care that exceeds anything available to civilian populations. Her family's health insurance provides access to treatments she knows could save the children dying in her ward, but cannot authorize without violating operational security protocols. The staff medical system creates its own surveillance networks that monitor personnel for signs of excessive compassion, unauthorized treatment provision, or ideological deviation from approved medical doctrine. Medical staff who show dangerous empathy for patients face immediate psychological evaluation and potential reassignment to positions where they cannot interfere with facility operations. But the system also provides incentives for continued participation through medical benefits that extend to staff families. Sister Chirurgeon Mortus's aging parents receive medical care in specialized facilities, where their treatment approaches miraculous effectiveness. Her siblings enjoy access to preventive medicine that ensures they never experience the conditions she treats through systematic neglect in patient populations. The contrast becomes most apparent during medical emergencies affecting staff personnel. When Sister Medicae Orthena suffers an industrial accident during blood collection procedures, her treatment involves immediate surgical intervention using equipment and techniques that could have prevented hundreds of patient deaths. Her recovery occurs within days through pharmaceutical interventions that remain unavailable to the populations she has systematically exploited. Staff medical records document treatment outcomes that prove the facility's genuine healing capabilities while demonstrating the deliberate nature of patient neglect. The same conditions that kill patients through theological intervention are eliminated in staff members through scientific medical practice. The facility maintains two complete medical realities that operate according to entirely different principles. As evening approaches, the worker completes his final observations of staff medical operations through security monitoring. That facility personnel don't realize extends to patient areas. He watches medical staff undergo decontamination procedures using equipment that could prevent most infections plaguing patient wards. He observes their access to nutritional facilities that could eliminate the malnutrition-killing children throughout the facility. The staff medical system reveals that Imperial hospitals always possessed the capability for genuine healing, but reserve effective medicine for populations whose health serves institutional survival rather than human welfare. The systematic patient abuse isn't resource scarcity or theological necessity. It's policy designed to maintain social control while preserving effective medical care for populations whose recovery supports Imperial operations. The worker leaves understanding that the medical staff represent both perpetrators and victims of the system they serve, possessing knowledge they cannot ethically apply, maintaining health they cannot extend to others, participating in systematic abuse they cannot acknowledge without destroying their psychological stability. Their survival depends on compartmentalizing their genuine healing capabilities from their institutional obligations. Tomorrow, the staff medical system will continue maintaining personnel health while facilitating patient exploitation, ensuring that the facility's operations continue serving Imperial priorities through the careful application of genuine medicine to some populations and systematic abuse to others. The worker's final departure is delayed once more by administrative procedures that seem designed to ensure he witnesses one last aspect of the facility's operations. As maintenance servitors escort him through service corridors he had never seen during his patient stay, he glimpses the concealed access panels he had unknowingly slept 17 meters from throughout his treatment. The panels bear warning symbols and authorization requirements that suggest they lead to areas requiring specialized clearance levels far above standard medical operations. His escort route takes him past Sub-Level 4's entrance, where he observes medical personnel in environmental suits different from those used during the plague crisis. These suits bear radiation shielding, chemical protection systems, and biological containment apparatus that suggests exposure to hazards exceeding anything present in conventional medical facilities. The personnel move with the careful precision of individuals working with materials that could kill them despite their protective equipment. Through reinforced observation windows, the worker glimpses laboratory facilities that dwarf the tissue processing operations he had witnessed during his stay. The deep wards house research programs that transform patient populations into experimental materials for projects that have nothing to do with healing and everything to do with weapons, development, biological research, and systematic human experimentation that violates every principle of medical ethics that once existed. Research Director Malthan Vex oversees operations that consume hundreds of patients monthly through experimental protocols designed to advance Imperial military capabilities rather than medical knowledge. His laboratories develop biological weapons using human test subjects, study disease progression through deliberate infection programs, and test pharmaceutical compounds through procedures that guarantee subject mortality while generating useful data. Current experimental phase requires 300 subjects for Disease Vector Modification Project Omega, he announces during staff briefings that occur in chambers shielded from all external surveillance. Selection criteria prioritize subjects with diverse genetic backgrounds, varied health status, and expendable social classifications. Standard mortality projections indicate complete subject consumption within 60 days. The deep ward operations explain the facility's true function as a distributed research network disguised as medical care. Patient populations serve as experimental materials for biological weapons development, disease research, and pharmaceutical testing that advances Imperial military capabilities through systematic human experimentation. The facility contributes to Imperial technological superiority through procedures that would horrify populations who believe they receive medical treatment. The worker realizes that his own treatment included research protocols he never suspected. His plague exposure provided data about disease transmission in tissue-depleted subjects. His blood extraction supported studies of immune system function under deliberate medical stress. His amputation surgery included neural response monitoring that contributed to research about pain tolerance in industrial populations. The deep ward research serves multiple imperial institutions simultaneously. Military medical facilities benefit from studies about treating wounded soldiers under resource scarcity conditions. Adeptus Mechanicus biological research advances through human experimentation that provides data about organic-mechanical interface optimization. Administratum population control programs receive information about systematic health degradation effects on social stability. But the most disturbing aspect of deep ward operations lies in their integration with patient treatment protocols throughout the facility. Every medical intervention includes experimental components that contribute to research programs while maintaining the appearance of therapeutic care. Patients receive treatment that serves research objectives rather than their welfare, with healing outcomes being incidental to data collection requirements. The worker observes patient transport systems that move unconscious subjects between research facilities and regular wards, maintaining the illusion of medical treatment while facilitating experimental access to human test materials. The same patients who undergo blessed acid treatment for gangrene also participate in pain tolerance studies. Those receiving pharmaceutical interventions for plague symptoms also contribute to biological weapons resistance research. Medical researcher Cor von Thex coordinates between regular patient care and experimental protocols, ensuring that research objectives integrate seamlessly with treatment procedures. His work transforms every patient interaction into data collection opportunities, while preventing subjects from recognizing their participation in experimental programs that treat them as laboratory materials rather than human beings requiring medical care. Standard patient processing protocols now include embedded research components for projects Sigma through Omega. He reports during coordination meetings that occur in areas sealed from patient access. Data collection rates have increased 40% while maintaining complete subject ignorance of experimental participation. Treatment outcomes remain within acceptable ranges for maintaining operational security. The research integration explains why patient recovery rates remain precisely calibrated rather than optimized. Too much healing would interfere with experimental protocols that require ongoing access to deteriorating subject populations. Too little healing would reduce research utility by eliminating subjects before useful data collection completes. The facility maintains perfect balance between patient survival and research requirements. The deep ward programs also serve recruitment functions for specialized Imperial services. Subjects who demonstrate exceptional resistance to biological weapons become candidates for military programs requiring enhanced durability. Those showing unusual reactions to experimental procedures provide genetic material for breeding programs designed to produce populations with specific physiological characteristics. But the research operations extend beyond simple human experimentation into systematic documentation of Imperial medical capabilities that remain hidden from general populations. The deep wards house archives containing detailed records of effective treatments, successful procedures, and genuine healing techniques that could revolutionize medical care throughout the Imperium if applied broadly rather than reserved for specialized populations. The worker glimpses medical libraries containing research that could eliminate most diseases plaguing Imperial citizens, surgical techniques that could prevent the disabilities he has witnessed throughout the facility, pharmaceutical developments that could transform human health outcomes across entire sectors. The knowledge exists but remains classified to preserve social control mechanisms that depend on systematic medical scarcity. The facility's research archives document decades of medical advances achieved through human experimentation disguised as patient care. Effective treatments for conditions affecting millions of Imperial citizens remain restricted to research applications that serve institutional priorities rather than humanitarian objectives. The deep wards house solutions to human suffering that are deliberately withheld to maintain political stability. Research archivist Severina Thorne maintains comprehensive databases documenting experimental outcomes, treatment effectiveness, and pharmaceutical developments that could revolutionize Imperial medical care if deployed broadly. Her archives contain evidence that effective healing has always been possible, but remains restricted to populations whose health serves specific institutional functions. Archive inventory indicates completion of 17 major research projects with immediate therapeutic applications, she reports during administrative reviews that document the scope of withheld medical advances. Pharmaceutical developments could eliminate 63% of conditions currently processed through standard patient facilities. Surgical techniques could prevent 87% of disabilities resulting from current treatment protocols. The archive documentation reveals that Imperial medical scarcity is entirely artificial, maintained through deliberate policy decisions that reserve effective treatments for social control purposes. The systematic patient abuse throughout the facility serves not resource limitations, but institutional requirements that depend on precise calibration of hope and despair among civilian populations. As the worker's escort reaches the facility's exit, he realizes that his months of medical treatment have provided him glimpses into a research apparatus that treats human suffering as valuable experimental data rather than urgent medical emergency. The deep wards represent the Imperial medical system's ultimate expression, the transformation of healing knowledge into weapons of social controls through systematic withholding of effective treatments from populations whose health would threaten institutional stability. His departure from the facility marks not the end of his medical education, but the beginning of his role as a walking repository of institutional knowledge that reveals the systematic nature of Imperial medical abuse. His survival serves not his welfare, but the facility's research programs, which benefit from long-term observation of subjects who have undergone comprehensive processing through medical experimentation disguised as therapeutic care. Tomorrow, the deep ward operations will continue, and the facility will process new experimental subjects through research programs that advance Imperial capabilities while maintaining the appearance of medical care, one carefully documented human experiment at a time. The worker steps through the brass doors into the morning air of Lower, Tertius, carrying with him the weight of institutional knowledge that transforms his understanding of Imperial medical care from systematic failure into deliberate success. The facility behind him operates exactly as designed, converting human suffering into social stability through the careful application of theological doctrine that makes systematic abuse appear as divine necessity. His discharge documentation includes a copy of the Imperial Prayer for medical intervention, the fundamental text that governs patient expectations throughout Imperial medical facilities. The prayer asks not for healing, but for strength to endure suffering properly, not for recovery, but for acceptance of whatever pain the Emperor deems spiritually necessary. The theological framework transforms medical neglect for institutional failure into religious observance. Emperor of mankind, master of our flesh, we do not presume to request healing for our corrupted forms. We ask only for the strength to bear whatever pain serves your sacred purpose. Grant us the wisdom to accept our afflictions as evidence of your divine judgment. Help us offer our suffering as prayer for the purification of our souls. Let our agony honor your eternal glory rather than seek relief from your righteous punishment. The prayer reveals the ideological foundation that makes imperial medical care possible. The positioning of suffering as spiritually necessary rather than medically preventable. By framing pain as divine communication and healing as potential interference with sacred purpose, the theological system justifies systematic withholding of effective medical care while maintaining patient gratitude for minimal intervention. This theological framework serves practical functions that extend far beyond religious comfort. Imperial medical doctrine positions suffering as spiritually beneficial, making patients grateful for inadequate treatment while discouraging demands for better care. The system transforms medical scarcity from political failure into religious virtue, ensuring that resource allocation decisions appear as divine will rather than institutional policy. But the theology of necessary suffering operates through more sophisticated mechanisms than simple patient conditioning. The doctrine provides comprehensive justification for every aspect of systematic medical abuse while maintaining the moral legitimacy of imperial authority. Patients who die from treatable conditions demonstrate insufficient faith rather than inadequate care. Those who recover prove divine favor rather than institutional competence. The worker realizes that his own medical experience exemplifies this theological system in operation. His gangrene was interpreted as spiritual corruption requiring purification through amputation. His plague exposure became testing of his faith through biological trial. His blood extraction served sacred contribution to imperial medical sanctity. Every abuse was reframed as religious benefit, every exploitation as spiritual opportunity. The theological conditioning affects not just patients, but medical staff who genuinely believe they serve divine purposes through systematic infliction of suffering on helpless populations. Sister Chirurgeon Mortis performs amputations with sincere conviction that she saves souls through deliberate destruction of healthy tissue. Her religious training prevents her from recognizing effective medicine as preferable to theological intervention. Imperial medical seminaries teach theological medical doctrine that subordinates healing knowledge to religious interpretation. Medical students learn to read disease as divine communication, to prescribe suffering as spiritual therapy, to view effective treatment as potential interference with sacred purpose. Their training produces medical practitioners who possess healing knowledge, but apply it only when institutional priorities align with patient welfare. The theological system also provides psychological protection for medical staff who must participate in systematic patient abuse while maintaining their sense of moral legitimacy. By framing medical neglect as religious observance, the doctrine allows medical personnel to inflict suffering without experiencing guilt, to withhold treatment without feeling responsible for consequences, to participate in systematic abuse while believing they serve higher purposes. Ecclesiarch Medical Voss maintains the theological framework through regular sermons that reinforce the spiritual necessity of patient suffering. His teachings explain why effective medical care would actually harm patients by denying them opportunities for spiritual purification through physical pain. The doctrine transforms systematic medical abuse into compassionate intervention designed to benefit patient souls rather than their bodies. The flesh is temporary vessel for eternal spirit, he preaches during mandatory staff devotions that reinforce ideological conditioning. Physical comfort corrupts spiritual development. Pain purifies soul through divine testing. Our duty serves patient salvation rather than bodily healing. We demonstrate true compassion by preserving opportunities for sacred suffering. The theological justification serves multiple institutional functions simultaneously. It maintains staff psychological stability while facilitating systematic patient abuse. It provides religious legitimacy for resource allocation policies that reserve effective medicine for valuable populations. It transforms medical scarcity from political problem into spiritual solution, ensuring that systematic neglect appears as divine wisdom rather than institutional failure. But the most insidious aspect of imperial medical theology lies in its sincere adoption by patient populations who have no access to alternative medical paradigms. The worker genuinely believes his suffering served sacred purposes because his education provided no framework for understanding systematic abuse as institutional policy rather than divine necessity. His gratitude for minimal treatment reflects successful ideological conditioning rather than objective assessment of care quality. The theological system creates self-reinforcing cycles that make systematic medical abuse appear sustainable and morally justified. Patients who suffer demonstrate their spiritual worthiness for whatever minimal intervention they receive. Those who die prove their salvation through proper acceptance of divine judgment. Medical staff who inflict systematic abuse serve sacred purposes that transcend conventional ethical concerns. Imperial medical facilities throughout the sector operate according to identical theological principles that ensure consistent application of systematic patient abuse disguised as religious medical practice. The worker's experience represents standard processing protocols rather than exceptional institutional dysfunction. The system functions exactly as designed, producing populations that are grateful for inadequate care while providing resources for institutional priorities. The prayer document in his discharge packet includes detailed instructions for ongoing spiritual medical practice that will govern his relationship with imperial health care for the remainder of his life. He must offer daily gratitude for his amputation as evidence of divine mercy. He must accept his respiratory damage as continuing opportunity for spiritual development. He must view his medical debt as sacred obligation that honors his treatment providers. As the worker walks toward his new housing assignment, he passes the queue of patients waiting for admission to the facility he has just left. They carry their requisition chits with religious fervor, believing they seek healing when they actually approach systematic processing through medical abuse disguised as theological intervention. Their hope reflects successful ideological conditioning that makes systematic exploitation appear as sacred opportunity. The facility continues its operations behind him, processing new patients through identical cycles of theological justification, systematic abuse, resource extraction, and discharge preparation. The system functions with mechanical precision because its theological framework makes every aspect of systematic medical neglect appear as divine necessity rather than institutional policy. The worker's medical education concludes not with understanding of Imperial healthcare's failures, but with recognition of its success in achieving objectives that have nothing to do with healing and everything to do with maintaining social control through the systematic application of suffering disguised as sacred medical intervention. The theology of necessary suffering ensures that Imperial medical care serves institutional stability rather than human welfare, one carefully justified abuse at a time. The Imperial prayer for medical intervention continues to be recited in medical facilities throughout the sector, transforming systematic healthcare abuse into religious observance while ensuring that effective healing remains reserved for populations whose health serves Imperial priorities rather than human need.